What's up, Brad Squad? This is Yonathan Elias. Now, according to the Center for American Entrepreneurship, there are 3.1 million immigrants that are entrepreneurs and 8 million people that are employed by immigrant-owned businesses. Now, that's pretty cool, right? But it shouldn't surprise you, because the history of the United States is filled with immigrants that came here for a better life and worked hard and thrived, and in return, gave back to this country that they made their home. Now, we're super lucky because we have a special tour of their new pop-up exhibit called Immigrants Mean Business, an enduring history of immigrant entrepreneurship that showcases immigrants from the early 1900s to today that were entrepreneurs. Now, let's go. All right, Brad Squad, I am here with Dave Favaloro. Did I say it right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
Pretty good.
Thank you. So what do you do here at the museum?
I'm the Director of Curatorial Affairs here at the museum, so I lead the museum's curatorial department. Most of what I do is research and exhibit development, but me and my staff are also tasked with caring for the museum's collections, our archives, and our historic buildings.
Nice. So why was it so important for the museum to showcase immigrant entrepreneurship?
Well, we were excited about the prospect of working with the New York City Department of Small Business Services when they approached us about collaborating on an exhibit that celebrated and explored the important mark that immigrant entrepreneurs have made on the fabric of the city, right? I think when you think about all of the iconic businesses here in New York, whether it's delicatessens or bodegas, right? So many of them have been started and operated by recently arrived immigrants and migrants.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what really stands out in this exhibit?
This is an exhibit not just about immigrant entrepreneurs in the past, but about immigrant small business owners and entrepreneurs in the present as well. We worked with a photographer whose name is Tesfa Alexander, who took photographs of immigrant small business owners throughout the 5 boroughs whom they had worked with. And then we worked with them to really find historical photographs that spoke to those as well, and then also objects and artifacts from the museum's collections that sort of dovetailed there. You know, I think this pairing of photographs, the contemporary one on the top and then the historical one on the bottom, even though perhaps to some folks 1975 is maybe not that historic, right? But I like, you know, this one in particular because it sort of connects 2 food-related businesses, and I think that's one thing that New Yorkers really appreciate about their city, that this is a city to which immigrants and migrants from all over the world 100 years ago or today have brought their food traditions, have brought their food cultures, and I think these 2 really sort of show that. So on the top, of course, you have Safia Hussain from Bangladesh talking about how she began a business that makes Bangladeshi style hot sauces. Which sounds really interesting, right?
Right, yeah.
And then on the bottom here is a photograph from the museum's collection taken by the photographer Edmund Gillen of the interior of Russ & Daughters, which is a Jewish appetizing store that's been around for now over 100 years, and now they actually have a really nice cafe up the block here. But I also really like this because when we think about immigrants and the contributions they make to the fabric of our city, being a small business owner, right, is no less hard work than if you were working in any other, I think, industry, whether it's manufacturing or some kind of service job.
So you did mention some of the storefronts. So is there one in particular that you can talk about?
Sure. Yeah. I like them all, but we could talk about we can talk about one. This one right behind you here, I think, is really interesting. This one actually used to hang at 97 Orchard Street. Of course, there's the number 97 there. And this was a business that sold hats and was in operation really from the 1930s up through the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
Right?
So you already showed me one of the pieces, and this was one of your favorites. I definitely want to see more.
Sure. Well, let's take a look at some of the other photographs on the other side of the room.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, I think this particular set of photographs is really interesting because this kind of business, operated by this gentleman, Michael Petrov, originally from the Soviet Union, which is sort of a computer networking business called Digital Edge. Clearly that didn't exist, right? So it really shows, I think, you know, immigrant entrepreneurs sort of establishing themselves in newer businesses, bringing skills and so forth. You know, with all of these photo pairings, we tried to sort of match the photos to some extent, you know, type of business, but what, right? What do you match this with? We had a really terrific photo from our collection of a family-owned business, Ironson watch and jewelry. And this is a sort of really interesting story behind this particular photograph. This was actually donated to the museum by a visitor who went on one of our walking tours. And on that walking tour, you get to see a really iconic photo of Orchard Street from 1898, where it's sort of looking south. And she was looking at that photo on the walking tour and said, I think that's the sign of my ancestors' business, and contacted us, confirmed it, and said, well, I have like the photo of them in front of the business if you want it. So these are these folks, also from Eastern Europe, perhaps not the Soviet Union clearly, but Eastern Europe nonetheless. And this is from really around that time, the mid 1890s, just a few blocks south of here. This would have been these folks. You can see some of the sort of clocks and things. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Cindy Undergarments was another business that was operating here on Orchard Street for decades during the 20th century. Sidney himself came as a child, an immigrant. He was with his family from Poland, also an East European Jewish immigrant. And ultimately he got into the wholesaling and the retailing of various kinds of ladies' undergarments. So this is from his store that was originally at 96 Orchard, but he moved the business across the street to 97 Orchard, which is now one of the buildings that you can tour as part of your visit here to the Tenement Museum. And you can really learn a lot more about Sidney and his family and his business on our Shop Life tour, which really explores the stories and the history of immigrant commerce from the middle of the 19th century to the present. We've been in touch for many years with the family members of Sidney, so both his daughter and in particular his granddaughter, who as a teenager in the 1970s spent Sundays working with her grandparents and took over at least 100 photos of the business that she's donated to the museum.
Wow. So it's so important to, create that relationship not only with the businesses and the buildings, but also with the family of the descendants.
That's really important to us, is those relationships and maintaining them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. So should we go to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
We were talking about Sidney Maida and Sidney Undergarments and the way in which his granddaughter worked in the business, spent time with her grandparents when she was a teenager in the 1970s. And she actually also held on to some of the merchandise, which add some color to our exhibit vitrine here. So this pair of women's underwear here was actually sold in Sidney Undergarments. She took that home. She's donated a few of these to the museum's collection. So you can see this one here is part of the Immigrants Mean Business exhibit, but you could also come on our Shop Life tour and see another pair of those women's underwear. One of the oldest businesses is a fortune teller, and so that little sort of handbill here, which is mostly intact, but this was also an East European Jewish immigrant named Dora Meltzer, who lived and operated a kind of fortune-telling business out of 97 Orchard Street in the first couple years of the 20th century, around 1902. And she appears to have been the aunt and sister of some of the family members who lived there. So she was with them. Well, let's take a look in the other room as well.
All right. All right, so now you showed me this entire exhibit, which is phenomenal. I want to know more about you. What is your immigration story?
My immigration story. On one side, my great-grandparents were Italian immigrants from Palermo, Sicily, and they came here to New York City, to Brooklyn specifically. That's where my father was born. I grew up out on Long Island, and that's where actually the other half of my ancestry came to. So on the maternal side, my grandparents arrived in the early 1950s from Hamburg, Germany after World War II, and they moved directly out to the suburbs. So now I'm back in the city.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and last, can I have you just look at the camera and say, my American dream is, and go.
My American dream is to share the stories of immigrants, migrants, and refugees here at the Tenement Museum. So come visit, take one of our tours, and come see Immigrants Mean Business.
Well, there you have it, Brad Squad. An amazing day. We want to thank the Tenement Museum and, of course, Dave for showing us this awesome exhibit. I need you guys to come here because we have to support businesses and organizations like this. It showcases immigrants that come to this country and work hard. This is what we know. We know this, but we need everybody else to know this. All right? Thank you guys for tuning in. Back to the studio.
Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.